And hello, Stefan.
Hey Steve, thanks
How
for
are
the
you doing?
invitation. Good, good. And
Thank
you?
you for jumping on at the absolute last minute. This is totally spontaneous, unscheduled, unplanned. So I apologize to you for pulling the stunt on you.
Yeah, well, I had 10 minutes of preparation, so could be
10
worse, I
minutes. I
think.
mean, come on. You can't ask for more than that, right? I mean, you could
Yeah.
build a BC app in 10 minutes. Actually, you literally have prototyped a BC app in 10 minutes. So,
If you let me
okay.
wait 10 minutes, I can just spin something up, right?
There you go. There you go. Okay. Well, thanks for joining me. So, for everyone watching, this I was thinking about this for a week and I didn't know quite what to do with it. And then I remembered something and then we pulled this together at the last minute. So, thank you for coming on. So, let me see if I can figure out all my buttons here. So, we're going to go here. So, the concept of this discussion is what I would call, for lack of a better term, complex page design, and we'll get into permutations of that. And I happen to have a specific scenario where this has come up. So Stefan is joining me because back in October 2020, he sent me a tweet, and miraculously, I was able to find this using Twitter search, my Twitter search foo skills. He
Yeah,
pointed
that's
out,
crazy.
yep, that the speed and the efficiency of putting together Business Central customizations or pages has a potential downside in that if you want to do a more complex page design, it can cost you hours to find a way in BC. And I thought, it looks super simple. How hard can it be, right? My famous last words. And so I asked, what is there a particular example of what that might be? And like, I didn't, I couldn't even conceive of what that scenario was. And you pointed out multi-line text fields can be challenging, side-by-side sublists on a card, link-like clickable text. So there were some like, okay, I could see kind of layout challenges and how the Business Central controls may not behave in the way that you would like for a particular UI. So that made sense. Well, now we are 1 year later, 1 year and 1 month later, almost to the day, and I started working on a new kind of live stream project because I wanted to be able to generate test data in Business Central. And I remembered, I was like, well, why am I killing myself over this? I developed this for Dynamics GP and I use it all the time. So why don't I just do something similar for Business Central? And I'll learn how to do some coding, I'll be familiar with the design concepts, and I'll learn like how to do this similar thing in Business Central and what's different. But then I prototyped this on the first episode and I immediately realized I had a problem. And my problem was that here in .NET, I can have multiple things going on one window. So this is like pretty simple in .NET. You just slap a bunch of noise on a form. You can have 27 buttons that do 27 completely independent things, and they read fields from that form or from a database, and you can get totally crazy. And it's messy, but I slapped this together very quickly. I've been using it for years. It works perfectly. It's an internal tool to do what I need to do. Well, I realized, okay, see those go buttons down the right side? Yeah, I got my page and I'm like, I don't know that I've ever seen a button that like does something on a page, let alone a page with 5 buttons that do 5 different things. I'm not a Business Central guru yet, but I can open a customer page or a customer card, right? And I can save that customer. I can go to a toolbar and the actions pane and I can look up something for that customer. It's like a one record, one operation kind of interface is my impression. Now, I'm sure there are alternate ways that you could do this, but Stefan's going to share some cautionary advice on that. And so I thought, well, how do I solve this, right? If I have a setup page with customers, vendors, items showing how many of those records I want to generate, well, could I use the actions menu at the top and say, well, do I create a data do I use a create data action? Well, the problem with that is that would potentially apply to all of my fast tabs here. So if I had 10 customers, 10 vendors, and 10 items, what if I only want to create customers? Do I create a create customers action, create vendors action? But what if I do want to create all 10 things? Then I've got to click 10 buttons. I then have a disable button on the customer, vendor, and item to turn those off, or do those need to be set to 0? It starts to get kind of clunky, kind of quick, and I'm like there's probably a better way. So I showed this to my developer, and he is also new to Business Central, so we're learning. So we discussed this, and he's like, well, out of the default, like out of the box UIs, one thing that does come to mind is list pages. So this is a creative one, I thought. It didn't occur to me. So if I had a list page that allowed me to have, say, customers, vendors, items, 10, 20, 30 records or options, whatever, you can do the select more option, select multiple items on the list page, and then go to actions. It's like, okay, it doesn't feel like terribly pretty. It looks like it might work, but like, I was never a big fan of the select more option, just because I'm not as familiar with it, but I suppose that could work. So, with all that said, with all the 10 minutes you've been given to prepare, what do you think about this? And do any of these options appeal to you, or would you propose some alternate UI designs?
Well, I think the page, I call it page because I don't know how it's called in the .NET world, you showed is quite similar to how forms were built back in the days with the classic client. So we, as a nav developer, we were able to build these kind of pages actually in NAV.
Okay.
So the same challenges you have now, probably every developer had when we had changed to the Windows client, the RTC.
Fascinating. That's great to know. Very cool.
Yeah, you could move. I didn't do that. I wasn't a developer back then, but from what I heard, you were able to move everything by pixels on any form, and you could really mock up quite some UI.
Got it.
Since the pages were invented and this came with the RTC, the Windows client, this isn't possible anymore.
Got it. Okay. So you're familiar with these types of limitations.
Yeah,
Got it.
I wasn't in the situation because I learned to code with NAV 2016. So I never had the possibilities like that to build a UI. But I know that others had the same limitations and challenges. So
Eric Hogard offered an idea. He says, use labels as fields with drill down. That's the way I create buttons on a page. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I will show that.
Okay, got it. And I think you mentioned that in your tweet. I don't know if that's exactly what you were referring to,
yes,
but
yes.
So you had said link like clickable text to run some code. So that's effectively like a button hack, right?
You exactly. You can create fields, put in a static text as value. You don't even need to have a variable or a field. You can just type in some text as a text constant value inside the field. And then you can set show caption to false, and you have just that text on the page. And if you then define a drill down trigger, the code will be executed if you click on that text. But I can show that.
Okay. Very cool. Okay. So, uh, what do you think? Do you want to show a mock-up, or what you're thinking? Some alternatives?
Well, I can show something, yes.
Okay, let me switch to your screen. Okay, so we are seeing your screen now.
Well, I tried to in 10 minutes to create,
Yes.
recreate, or try to show the concepts of your page
Yep.
you
And
created.
and to be fair, he literally had less than 10 minutes to do this. So,
Exactly. So what we are seeing is a grid layout page. So um, it's not only possible to use groups on pages, but also grids. I will show that later on.
nice.
And this creates literally a grid on the page. So the vertical lines we see, and there are also invisible horizontal lines. So there is actually also a field just with a blank text,
Hmm.
and also here
Got it.
to create that kind of page. And every single of these cells are fields. So here are cells with static text, these ones,
Okay.
and here are fields with a variable behind.
Wow.
And this is the clickable button if you want to.
Yep.
So behind is a message which just gives out a static text with this value.
Got it.
So to prove there is actually code behind, we can type in something and it prints. So I didn't cheat.
And are these fields backed by a table, or are you using? I think
No.
someone recommended variables, just storing this.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, got
There
it.
is no table behind. We can't create anything new here or delete.
Got
It's
it.
not enabled. We can share, but we cannot edit. And the
Okay.
code behind looks like that. So if I maybe collapse a little bit here,
Very cool.
there is no source table behind. And I created a bunch of variables and initialized them in the open page trigger here to just have some default values inside. And then in the layout area content, you can see I created 2 rows
Uh-huh.
for now.
Okay.
And in each row, you need to define all the fields. And in this kind of grid layout, it's always necessary. As far as I remember, I didn't try lately, but you need to create the same amount of fields, the same number. So to have
So
everything aligned, I need to have an empty field here starting.
got it. So row one needs to have, say, 7 columns, and row two and always needs to have 7 columns going forward.
Yeah. I would need to try what happens if I don't have this, but
Got it.
I think
I
it
mean,
would
it
work.
makes sense. That should be easy enough.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, is this grid design? I don't recall it off the top of my head. I don't recall seeing it. Is it an unusual design in Business Central?
Well, I wouldn't be able to recall any page in the base app which uses this.
Interesting.
Maybe something hidden deep inside the service module or somewhere, I don't know.
Right. So
But
I
it's
guess I
fairly not
won't
common.
I won't beat myself up for not knowing about
No, no,
this
no.
page design. Okay. Because I
And
I have read a couple books on all the page layouts, and I don't recall grid.
um,
Interesting.
yeah, because as far as I know or remember, when the web client started, this didn't work at all at the beginning, and then it was quite buggy.
Ah.
So I think since BC 17, it's actually usable again. So yeah,
Yeah, Jeremy's saying that the grid layout is definitely a rare animal. So, given that it is rare, would you advise against using it? Like sometimes it's like you can be cool using the edgy stuff, but sometimes it can get you into trouble, and it may not be worth the hassle.
yeah. Given that example we just saw, you need to create the captions yourself because every field is set to show caption false.
Okay.
Otherwise, that would not align as well as I showed it.
Okay.
So it's quite a hassle to get the page working that way as you want it to work. So if you want to recreate that separation, you would maybe need to create an empty line. Then you have, I don't know, 20, 30 empty pages, empty fields on the page to just recreate and arrange everything like you want to have it. So for a customer, I wouldn't do it.
Okay, so that, yes, for a customer, that sounds prudent. Now, what if, let's see, on this page, with the idea being that if I have, say, additional customer options down here, instead of going across in the grid, I do more of what a kind of, say, a vertical field listing within this fast tab for customers. Maybe I have account, maybe I have option US customers, Europe customers, Canadian customers. Could I also do a similar concept with the clickable link label and have a go there?
I would probably recommend doing that you create a group like you did for customers, and then you put every settings you want maybe to have for creating customers inside that group. And at the end, you can still do a start creating or a go link like I just showed.
Okay.
To kick off that creation. Still would work, and it would be fairly easier to just you can just put in every field you want to have inside that group. And if you resize the window and everything, it just rearranges like it always does in Business Central. If you're using grids, that can sometimes become a weird result. Because they actually don't resize. They don't float like normal fields do.
Okay, that you're not selling me on the grid here. So it's more of a it's one of those things where it's like, yes, it looks like it does what you want, but it's almost like a cautionary tale of, well, you may not want to go there. But it's good to see the alternative. Now, if I add the additional fields, another question that I had, which comes up in this interface is, you notice near the bottom here, oops, PowerPoint. So near the bottom, what I'm able to do in .NET is, this is a single threaded app, so I'm not doing anything fancy, but as it runs, if I click on Go, it shows the status. And it does it in two ways. First, there's the little message box at the bottom. Right now, this says import complete. But as it's running, it shows I'm working on batch 1, batch 2, batch 3, transaction 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So it's constantly updating as it's looping through these records. I have messages being sent to this status bar. And then I have static messages, for lack of a better term, that get logged to this log box here. So it says 10 GL transactions imported in 8 seconds. That tells me it's complete. And then down here I say import complete. And the context is that sometimes I need to import 400,000 transactions, and I need to test on these large data sets. And sometimes that'll take an hour. So I'll start this, I'll go get a coffee, have lunch or whatever. And when I come back, I can check the status. For long running operations, even if it's not an hour, let's say it's 5 minutes, is there some mechanism by which if I had a go link or a go button here, that you can send feedback to the user? Or is it kind of this, you click go and you just have to wait for some update to occur?
Well, if you put the code right into the trigger and execute it, every user needs to wait. The user which clicked needs to wait, because it's running on the UI thread. And yeah, until it's finished or canceled, the client just hangs and loads and does nothing.
Okay.
So then there it gets more complicated. I could imagine something like you run it in background via the job scheduler, task. I don't know. how it's called, but there you can run it in the background and create a simple logging table, where
Okay.
you can
Yep.
just put in your logs in the background and then show some, I don't know, maybe sums or filtered sums or anything on the page as a flow field or something.
Hmm.
Then you can just hit F5 and see the results, click on it and see detailed view of it.
Got it. And so that pushes it off the UI thread, for lack of a
Yes.
better term. Okay. And
Yes.
so that would be like a job queue entry.
Yeah, similar.
Okay.
You can do it via code without a job queue entry to be created. You can just schedule a code unit to be run in background.
I have a few questions. So Jeremy points out clickable text is often deployed in wizard pages too. So that's good
Yeah,
to
that's
know.
right.
And that's interesting. Clickable text in wizard pages. I'll have to look for examples of that. I haven't used many of the wizards, so it's something that's on my to-do list for another reason. Jeremy
Yeah,
also
but
says,
I recall that. Yeah,
okay,
it's
Jeremy
commonly
says
used.
grid layouts are definitely rare, and that this this chat is a challenge to demo on how to make a complex JavaScript control add-in for more flexible parameter setting. So, as
Uh,
if it's going on his to-do list, as if he has nothing else to do, right? He
yeah,
also says,
but
yeah,
I want to come back to that
okay,
JavaScript because um, I read it often that people just at a low level of complexity start to create um, JavaScript controls for UI design,
hmm,
and for some reasons that may be valid point, but I always try to not create JavaScript for full screen controls because I don't probably in Eric videos a video
yep,
today of his old navigator. There he rephrased no, he read a section of his documentation from the navigator, and that he told that you shouldn't create, or you should your UI should align with the UI which is already there. I don't recall the words exactly, but
right,
something like that. So the user interface doesn't break that much, and the user doesn't need to learn different kind of UI. So if you create just from scratch with JavaScript a full page UI control, that may be confusing for the user.
got it. No, my developer and I tried to do something small using JavaScript in Business Central. I think it was JavaScript and manipulating the UI, and we found it to be sketchy.
Yeah,
It kind of worked, but it broke. Like, I mean, if it was a Tuesday, it would break. If the weather was warm, it would break. Like, if
yeah,
Microsoft did anything, it would just break, and we'd have to rebuild
yeah.
it because they changed their structure.
That's the
So
second point. Yes.
yeah, it was very fragile. So we now know that, like, if we're thinking of JavaScript, it's probably a bad idea in Business Central, based on our experience. That we had to abandon that solution. It just didn't work.
Well, it is nice if you just create something like, I don't know, an example PDF reader, a viewer, uh, for maybe incoming documents that you can just look at them inside the client. Then you build something new inside your control add-in container, and it isn't touching anything of Business Central. It's an
Right.
addition
Good point. Okay.
and a small point, which is, yeah, it's you're not entering data, you're not
Manipulating other
showing.
components or
Yeah,
controls.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
If you
We were.
depend on something of Business Central, it's always complicated and
It was a good lesson, and we realized, yeah, we're not going to do that again. It was painful.
yeah,
Let's see. Jeremy says you can also use page background tasks, but if the page is closed, the task will cancel.
yeah, yeah.
And so that's a background task in, I guess, tied to the UI.
Yes.
So,
The common use case is to load data, which is displayed inside a fact box, for example. If you have some calculations or something similar, then you can load it off in the background task, the page background task. If you close the page, you don't need the data anyway.
okay.
And if it's not in the UI thread, you don't need to wait for the data to be calculated in terms that the page will show.
Got it. Got it. So for this type of thing that that I'm trying to do, uh, the scheduled task is what you called it, which I need to look that up to see what they call that.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with job queue. I'm not familiar with scheduled tasks. So I'll need to look that up. It sounds like that would be the way to go. The user can refresh the page, the user can close the page, go on to something else. And I could potentially even send some type of notification to them to say, hey, it's done. Your 1,000 records have been created.
Yeah. I think I blogged about it a year ago.
Oh, okay.
Different possibilities to run stuff in the background, because
Cool.
you have multiple possibilities, and probably it's called Task Scheduler is also one part of that series.
I'm just Googling now. Blog task scheduler. Let's see if I can find it. Coding for performance.
Yes.
Task scheduler. Look at this. Let's see if I can.
Well, if that's not live, I don't know.
There we go. So fascinating. Let me see if I can resize this here. So we have user sessions, user tasks, process queue, background task. Okay, so start session, easily run a code unit in the background and relieve the user session. Okay, and so this does run on the same server instance, so you have to be good. You have to be careful about performance impact.
Well, not necessarily.
Okay,
You can set up server instances to either run the background queue or not.
okay.
Exactly. There you can see the screenshot task scheduler. You can
Uh-huh.
disable it for a server instance, and you can have different server instances on different VMs, for example, to only run background tasks, and a dedicated one for UI sessions.
Interesting. Being new to the BC SaaS world, the concept of a server instance is foreign to me. It like if I log into BC SaaS, is that one server instance, or like do I have the option of multiple server instances?
Well, you missed a session on directions.
Okay.
Last week, 2 weeks
Directions
ago.
EMEA.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
It was explained that in SaaS, they dynamically manage how many server instances are running, and they have a load balancer in front of that. So if new sessions are created, they are automatically balanced between the server instances which are currently running. So they, as far as I understood, or they had in their presentation, they are not different, they don't have dedicated UIs server instances or background server instance. They are
Okay.
just balancing everything.
Okay. So in theory, if I use this technique and spawned a process that's going to run for 20 minutes, they will kick that off to a given whatever server instance in a pool, for instance, and it'll handle it, and it won't necessarily impact.
Yeah.
It may not impact the end user experience.
Yeah. And I would think that it could potentially also enable better balancing if you create background sessions, because as far as I understood, the balancing is on session level. If you do everything in one session, it can't be balanced, right?
Got it. Okay. So I'm gonna have to rewatch this video in order to remember this and look this stuff up. So Eric mentions with his Cloud Replicator app, he starts up to 100 background sessions, which is the max allowed on SaaS. which I'm sure the BC team is thrilled to see 100 sessions spool up. They're probably getting these telemetry alerts left and right, like, why is this on fire like a nuclear power plant?
Yeah. I don't remember the exact numbers, but there was something that you have, as in the screenshot is also shown, concurrent sessions or
Okay.
tasks running, and then there is a queue, which also has a limit at some point.
Okay. Got it. Fascinating. I was completely, I had no knowledge of this. So thank you for pointing this out. This is from July 2020, and I was I am still, but I was more clueless back then, over a year ago. I'm just a little less clueless now. So this is an entire domain that I was completely unaware of. And now that I know about this, this is fascinating because I thought the only way to schedule something and kind of have a recurring task or a scheduled task was job queue. This introduces an entirely new dimension that I was completely unaware of. So fascinating. Very cool. Okay. So thank you. Wow. Okay. So check out Stefan's blog. It's just stefanmaroń.com. And this was a series, Coding for Performance Task Scheduler. And there is a prior.
And a prior.
And a prior.
Background task in general. Oh,
Okay.
broken
Background
link.
tasks in general. Okay. So that's number 2. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll have to dig for number 1. But there's an
Yeah,
entire.
I did a few posts about performance back then, and 3 or 4 posts in this series was dedicated to async development. So, but
Okay.
you hit the first one for
Got it. Okay, there it is. 3, 2. Okay,
text
text
builder.
builder. I do remember the text builder one. You compare
Okay.
different performance
Yes.
of concatenating strings. Got it. Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, I was talking to the right guy then. That's perfect. Very cool. Well, any closing thoughts? You had mentioned that you perhaps had some cautionary tales about this type of complex UI design.
Yeah. In general, when designing pages in Business Central, I would recommend to not be too stick to an old concept, because many of those things you cannot just recreate the design of like you showed a .NET form where you can just move everything like you want to have it.
Yep.
But you can get the job done, I think, somehow, and it doesn't need to look exactly like it did before.
Yep. I completely agree. This by no means is the poster child of good UI design. So if this is scrapped completely, I will have no hurt feelings whatsoever. This was simply cobbled together and then new fields were slapped on over a couple of years to
Like
do
it
what I
always
needed.
does.
And it was purely an internal tool. So this is the most neglected tool I have. There are 10 different ways of doing the same thing behind the scenes because I was literally just copying in code from other projects as quickly as I could just to get it to work. So it's one of those things that it's like, yeah, you do not want to look at the code for this project. So I am happy to redesign this in whatever makes sense in a different, design concept that is a little more designed. Yeah. Oh, and Eric makes a good point. Your .NET app doesn't look nice on a high DPI screen. And every Windows developer that I know, this is the high DPI is a nightmare. I have an app where it works fine for 90% of my customers, but anyone who has got high DPI, it simply doesn't display properly. I've tried to change the anchoring. I've tried to change the dimensions. I just can't get it to work properly for certain customers because of the rendering and the resizing on high DPI. So I totally agree. It's a nightmare. And if I never have to deal with high DPI and manifest files and Dynamics GP have the same issue, I will not complain. So I'm perfectly fine to have a simpler layout, right? to have a more constrained user interface, if that's the cost of letting BC handle the UI, I'm totally cool with that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. If you embrace what Business Central can do for you on Pages, then you can benefit from all that resizing and the, I mean, in the latest two updates, probably major releases, there was quite some improvement on the page, yeah, how the pages show up if you just resize or if you have really small screens or something.
got it.
And with the grid layout, you can recreate something like you did, but it wouldn't work as well, in my opinion.
And I am fine benefiting from the page resizing, proper rendering, consistent layout, consistent user experience, plus the mobile apps, right? So a tablet and a phone app, in
Well,
theory, my custom
mo-
page could show up there, right?
it could, but that's another chapter, I think, for how to
Okay,
design
so
pages for mobile
I'll
clients.
I'll walk that statement back. I'll say hypothetically,
Yes,
in theory, right? We could have a custom page. Okay, cool.
absolutely.
Very cool. Well, thank you for this. Any other final thoughts, or is that good?
I think that's
Okay.
it.
Well, excellent. That was awesome. Thank you for the 10-minute prep. That was pretty impressive for 10 minutes of prep. And your blog post is a great reference. I didn't realize that. And thanks for those who joined us and asked the questions. Um, so thank you very much, Stefan.
Yeah,
I appreciate
thanks
it.
for the invitation.
Okay, and we will wrap up, and I'll chat with you after. Okay, thanks everyone.
Bye.